What's going on, folks? Kendall here with Renos for Pros and Joes, back with the next installment of this bathroom remodeling update. In the previous video, I showed you guys how to remove thinset from a concrete floor, and as you can see, quite a bit of work has been done since the last installment of this series. Unfortunately, this is where we pick up with the footage. Hey, bring the cameraman. But in any case, you just saw me inside of the bathroom taking measurements to do my cut for my sheet of drywall that has to be installed there on that wall underneath the window. There's another small piece right there behind the door if you also notate that. Typically on larger jobs, I would have a drywall crew come in and do this type of job, but unfortunately this particular project is, number one, well off the beaten path, and number two, with such a small scope of work for drywall, it just wouldn't be time or cost effective to do that. So I am in the trenches today doing the drywall work. As you can see, I'm using my drywall square. I can't tell you how many times I've done drywall repair with a level or any straight edge that's available to me at the time I'm trying to cut drywall. And I have to say that using this drywall square is a lot easier and a lot more precise than using something else. So I'm just making sure here that I've got everything lined up exactly the way that I want it, because when you're doing drywall, you want to have your pieces fit together as well as you can. And since I've got a large enough piece here to make it exactly the size that I need it, that's what I'm doing here, is just double and triple checking. So now I'm going to get my razor knife here ready to go, get me a fresh blade queued up, and then start making my cuts. It's also nice to be able to use the drywall square as a straight edge once you've got your lines marked there. As you can see, this actually took place a little bit earlier in the season. As you can see, I've got shorts on and a lightweight shirt, and you can also see me periodically stop and slap my legs. There are mosquitoes in the area, and so that's what you're seeing me do. So now I'm making my horizontal cut here, slowly but surely. And I'm going to score it here on this side as well. You know, this is a really important part of drywall installation and is often overlooked. On larger drywall projects, frequently the hanging of the drywall and the finishing of the drywall are separated, and they're often done by two separate contractors. So there's actually more than one skill set involved in doing this. But as I said before, the cleaner that you can make your cuts, the easier it is to install the drywall. I'm going to be keeping the part on the bottom, and the part on the top is actually not going to be usable for this particular install. As you can see, I'm using green board, which is a mold-resistant drywall specifically designed for wet areas like bathrooms and kitchens. Leave that there. Let's step back inside. Now we're back in the bathroom, and it's time to go ahead and kind of get some things out of the way. As you can see here, the tile installers have actually already started. Scheduling has been a nightmare on this project, and the tile guys just finished working. I've got to hop back in here and get these pieces in so that we can make sure that everything fits together nice and neatly. I don't have to have everything perfect, but I do need to get my pieces installed. I do need to go ahead and put on my first layer of mud after I go ahead and tape that. So as you can see here, I'm trying to fit this drywall board into this space right here. You can't really see it, but even though this is essentially the right size that it should be, there still has to be some slight modifications because we're going back in and we are installing it in a place where we've cut off some drywall before. And so as we're doing that, we're going to have to go ahead and modify and just kind of trim the drywall that's there to make sure that we can get a good fit here. And as you can see, that board is laying there on the concrete floor. I'm also going to have to step outside and make some shims so that I can raise the board up high enough to meet right there at the bottom of the existing board underneath the window. So that's what I'm outside doing right now, is breaking up and making some quick shims. So you can see I've got some drywall shims. I'm going to go ahead and place those underneath each end of this board so that I can raise it into place, and I can more easily work with it as I go ahead and install my screws and everything like that and get it in place so that I can get ready to do my mud. When doing this type of project, you also have to make sure that you are focused on what you're doing. When you get into corners and things like that, it really becomes obvious whether or not the room is out of square, and they almost always are. And you can also tell whether or not walls and things like that are leaning, because it's going to show in the drywall. So for example, even though this drywall is square, the wall is not completely straight, and so it always is going to require some type of trimming or modification when you get into tight spaces like this. As you can see, I've got my caulk gun here. I'm actually taking a moment to go ahead and run a bead of caulk along the studs behind the drywall, just to help make sure that the drywall doesn't slip and to prevent movement over the life of this drywall install. So I'm just going to go up and down each one of these studs here and make sure I've got a nice coat of glue on there before I go ahead and put my drywall board back in place. This is not a step that has to be done for a scope this small, but I'd like to go ahead and do it just because I have the materials on site, and rather just go ahead and take the time to do that additional step. I am looking for something, probably with my knife, if I had to guess. So I'm back in here. Here we go with the knife. As I said, this just takes a lot of trial and error with regards to trying to get everything exactly in place. I go ahead and move my board out of the way because now I can see the exact cuts that I need to make along the bottom of this existing piece of drywall to make sure that the new piece fits. So even after I put my shims on the floor and put that drywall board in place, I can see that there are high and low spots on the bottom side of this window piece of drywall here. And so that's what I'm going and doing right now, is just kind of cutting and trimming and cutting and trimming. And it kind of takes a little bit of trial and error to make sure that we can get that piece in there exactly the way that we want to. Also, when we're installing drywall in this way, we also want to make sure that because we're in a corner, that we have a good understanding of which board is going to be installed first. We need to know which board is going to go all the way to the wall that is over there on the other side at the 90-degree angle, and which one is going to stop short and butt into the other piece. So for this particular install, I'm running this long board all the way into the corner out, and then the short piece that goes behind that door there I will install on top of the long piece that's being installed now, if that makes sense. You know, it's really interesting when I go back and watch the footage from these videos, because it shows me how many steps and how active I am just over the course of doing a small project like this. I go in and out of the space and in and out of the property, and there's a lot of walking around here. So that's one of the reasons why I prefer to wear tennis shoes when I'm doing interior work like this, because it's just the most comfortable thing on my feet. Some people like to wear boots and things like that, but I found that over time it just ends up being overkill. Your feet get hot, and when I'm doing something like this, there's not a whole lot of risk of me injuring my feet or anything like that, so I'm completely fine with wearing tennis shoes. Plus, it's a really, really hot day today. So as you can see, I'm here. I am starting to install the screws. I'm using my impact driver here to run my screws into the drywall and into the studs. And I'm also trying to get down low here to make sure that I've got my drywall at the right height that I want it, so that I can have everything straight and level on both ends and at the top and bottom. As you can look here closely, you can see that there is a small gap there at the bottom of that board. That is actually intentional. The drywall is not supposed to touch the ground. In this case, we're working with concrete, which does hold moisture, so it's even more imperative to not have it touch on the ground. The bottom of this wall will actually be covered by the trim of the baseboards and shoe molding once we get all those things installed. But first things first, we got to get this drywall in here, and we've got get everything looking good. So I'm going back through here and attaching these last few screws in here, right here against the edge here where we transition over to our tile shower enclosure. You know, I originally hadn't planned on taping this full thing, and I just kind of turned the camera on and let it run. So there's not a complete footage of me doing the other wall, but as you can see here, you can see the gist of what's going on here. Doing a lot of stretching and bending and things like that. It's funny how I keep scooting that level around instead of just completely getting it out of the way. I initially was using it as a straight edge to make a line to be able to trim along to cut away the drywall on the bottom of that board that is currently installed on the existing wall there underneath the window and along that wall underneath or behind the door. So now I'm taking a quick break and I'm unplugging the tile saw. And as you can see here, a lot of times I reference tools that I see on job sites. That's exactly what I'm doing here. Taking a quick break and taking a close look at this tile saw here. I'm back to it now. It's really hot in here. As you can see, I'm perspiring pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the last few screws into this board, trying to make sure that I've got them against the wall tight before we jump on to the next phase of this. So as I said before, unfortunately on this particular series of this installment, I don't have the complete install. So there's only going to be one board here that's going to be installed, and then I'm going to be jumping to the finishing of the wall. So even after I've got the new board installed, I'm still trying to go through and make sure that I've got my existing drywall clean the way that I want it, because the next step is going to involve taping and mudding. And in this particular install, I'm going to be using a drywall tape instead of the standard tape, which is going to actually have an adhesive back, which will save some time with the drying time for the installation and floating of the mud on the wall. So I'm getting everything ready here on the next wall, cleaning everything up, trying to get it exactly the way that I want it before I step outside in order to do the next phase of this. Now, as I mentioned before, unfortunately, this is the only board that I have on this video getting installed. As we fast forward a bit, you can see the tile installers have been hard at work, and you can also see that those drywall boards are installed and have an initial coat of mud. Stay tuned for the next installment of this bathroom remodeling update series. See you on the next one.